So I had reservations about doing this review in general. I was just so conflicted on Apple's newest product line, the HomePod. It was like a roller coaster of being thoroughly impressed by something on the first day, so much that I tried convincing myself that it was a great product, that it was gonna solve all of my issues, and that this was really worth the money. But alas, the honeymoon period came to end and the harsh reality came in. Alright, so this is Apple's HomePod, Apple's first step into smart speakers, but under the careful shrouded excuse that it isn't really a smart speaker, but is actually a high-end speaker that has Siri in it. I got to put Apple's newest product to the test and see how it fared to me. Now note, and I think this is important, I'm a person that actually has a lot of Apple devices. I have maybe I listed this before, but I have almost everything from the product line except for previously a HomePod and an Apple Watch. I'm a person that really likes their products. I like the design and feel of the iPhone and iOS. I love my iPad, and my MacBook is a godsend. But I returned my Apple Watch because I felt like it wasn't ready for prime time yet, and I feel like I might come to the same conclusion for the HomePod. Let's start off with some good though, and one of those is design. It has a clean finish from top to bottom, a very easy user interface with a giant plus and a minus for volume, and a very beautiful display that blurs colors together when using Siri for all your Siri things. First time setup requires pairing to an iOS 11 device with the Home app. I deleted this for my iPhone, but luckily I had it on my iPad. The stitching all around is a nice touch that made me purposely avoid buying the white one, not only because it looks like a giant marshmallow to me, which I'm not a fan of, but because with my habits, I know that I'm probably gonna get it dirty in a couple of days, and I'd rather not have to deal with that. Back to the stitching. It also extends to the power cable, and that's very Apple-like of them to do, especially since Apple doesn't want you to unplug it, even though you can. Powering the brains of the HomePod is Apple's A8 chip, which is plenty enough to run the smarts of this thing. The internals have a 7-tweeter array near the bottom facing outwards with 6 microphones just around the middle to listen out for your call. The top is a pretty good sounding woofer, which works really nicely in producing really crisp bass. When setting up, the HomePod bounces sounds from the surrounding walls. It knows where to aim the music and generally how to map out your room for optimal sound. After the setup is complete, the HomePod will be directing the majority of its sound towards you or where the empty space is, as well as bouncing off a chunk of the music against the wall to produce some nice near surround sound-like effect, all from this little thing. So outside from the build quality, let's talk about peripherals. And I can't believe Apple did this, and I'm actually genuinely upset about this, but there's no ports on this whatsoever. This is a speaker. All you can do is connect via AirPlay, not even Bluetooth. There's room here. You could have had a port, some kind of river system where you could plug a headphone jack, or hell, even a USB-C port, because I get it. If Apple, you're trying to push us as consumers towards a USB-C future, could you at least given us that so we can route data through some way, somehow? If they made this bigger, they could have at least put a USB-C port probably underneath it as well, just be able to connect other phones or other devices. I don't mind buying another adapter if it means other people can use this awesome speaker. But you're really limiting yourself here. Now, when I was setting up the actual device itself on day one, it became apparent to me with all the pop-ups that Apple really wants me to try out the 3-month free trial for Apple Music. Because yeah, I get it. All having your music stored in the cloud, it would make this a very convenient device, but that's not me. I don't like having my music stored in a off my phone kind of situation. I like having my music stored on my devices, from my iPad to my Mac to my iPhone, etc. So immediately this became, to me at least, a $350 AirPlay speaker. Again, I want to put a lot of emphasis on this. Notice how I mentioned AirPlay. I can't figure out why, but this $350 admittingly great sounding speaker cannot connect to other devices via Bluetooth and is solely reliant on AirPlay, to the point where my MacBook, yes, my MacBook, an Apple product device, an Apple device, technically cannot connect to my HomePod. It doesn't show up on my speaker list at all, but technically iTunes on my MacBook can. Is this kind of stupid little oversight that really, that ruins the whole Apple experience for me, okay? I don't know if they purposely chose this or this was an accident, but I want to believe that they just forgot about it. Ideally, this can probably be fixed with a software update, but I wouldn't hold my hopes up. Okay, so speaking about things glossed over and forgotten about, let's talk about Siri. So Siri first came out with the iPhone 4S. Apple was so proud of it, they stuck the S at the end of it, and at the time that really meant Siri. With that, Siri has really stagnated over the last maybe half decade at this point. You have Amazon Alexa and Google's voice assistant really making strides into anything and everything. Alexa has saturated the market so thoroughly well that you have Alexa integration on some new cars now. You have Google doing more complicated tasks and using prior contextual knowledge to help just overall make the whole experience better. At this point, with how much attention they're putting to Siri, I don't think we're ever gonna get that kind of return of Siri, at least with how Apple's treating it. So this took a while to get to, but how do they sound? As I alluded earlier, they sound honestly amazing. So if you have any newer music like hip hop, electronic, or kind of dance music, it does it amazingly well. You kind of hear things you never thought you'd hear. It kind of overemphasizes on the bass. It's really punchy and sharp, and the highs are pretty well decently done, with the mids nearly flat, but that's a very tried and true formula with Beats, and it's been refined under Apple, and I think it's the right ratio. Some of my older music, for example though, like Hey Jude by the Beatles, it actually sounds almost exactly the same as my HomePod as compared to my Beats Pill. There is surprisingly a good amount of heft to this, and I'll show on the screen later, and I'll show on the screen how much it weighs, but it's a lot heavier than it looks like. As I mentioned earlier, I'm disappointed that they didn't add any peripherals to this thing, but I think I'm more disappointed by the fact that this would have been a great time to add USB-C for some kind of data transfer. Because with the future of everyone adding USB-C to their phones and maybe to an upcoming Apple products one day, it would make sense. Not everyone is approved for AirPlay. It would have been an acknowledgement that this is the future, and I really can't think of any downsides to it. So this begs the question, just who is this for? So while I admit my bias, I am probably an Apple fan. I do really like what they produce, but you gotta call a spade sometimes, and I don't think this is worth it. I don't think this is worth $350. If it was maybe $220, maybe $250, I'd consider buying it and keeping it. These are more limiting. These are just an AirPlay enabled speaker with no Bluetooth connectivity to your other devices that you could probably want to connect your lying around Android tablet on, or if you have friends over. It's just a party trick for you. And to sum it up, I think the HomePod is a great first step for Apple. It's just like the Apple Watch for me. I like the idea, but I don't like the product. So maybe in a couple years, they'll get it right after 1 or 2 iterations, and we'll see. Maybe a price point drop here and there. There's a rumored HomePod Mini coming out. Maybe we'll see that next year, and I get to review that, and we'll compare the sound quality. Also, by that time, Siri just has to get a lot better. There are so many things that she would love to do, but she can't. And there's so many things I want her to do, but she can't. Please don't lie to yourself like how I tried to lie to myself. Until then, I'm gonna have to give this bad boy a pass. Who should buy a HomePod?
HomePod is a breakthrough wireless speaker from Apple that delivers amazing audio quality. You can control it using your voice with Siri. Hey, wait, that's me.
She's funny. I'm still gonna return her. Thanks for watching this video, guys. As I mentioned earlier, I am still thoroughly impressed by the sound quality the HomePod brings. It is a lot of technology packed into here, and I think that's something worth mentioning, at least somewhere near the end. In the end of the day, it's still a smart home speaker. It doesn't do the smart part of home speaker justice. Tell me what you guys think about the HomePod. If you liked what you saw, like the video. If you really liked what you saw, go ahead and click subscribe. All right, see ya. Peace.